The Mirage of Majoritarianism and the Myth of Intolerance. François Gauthier was born in France in the early 80s. He began freelancing in India for different publications and finally ended up being the correspondent in South Asia for the Geneva-based Journal des Genève, then one of the best international newspapers in Europe. In 1993, he switched to Figaro, one of France's leading newspapers, for which he exclusively worked for 10 years. He also started writing regularly for Indian newspapers, first in Blitz Bombay, then in Hindustan Times. Later came the Firangis column in Indian Express and the French Connection column in The Pioneer. He was also the regular contribution maker for Rediff.com, New Indian Express, Times of India, and other prestigious blogs. François, who is married for 25 years to Namrita, shuttles between Pondicherry, Pune, and Delhi. Put your hands together for François Gauthier.
I'm first going to address the myth of intolerance because this is one of the most baffling and incomprehensible myths about India. India is a land of tolerance. If you see today in India and yesterday, every persecuted religious community has found refuge in India. From the Christian Syrians to the Parsis to the Jews. You know, the Jews, the only country in the world where the Jews were never persecuted is India. Many of them went back in 1947, but there's still a few left in Cochin and in Bombay. Today, the Tibetans, every religious community persecuted in the world has found refuge in India. Why? Because it's a land of tolerance. And this tolerance is due to one community, which is called the Hindus. Now, people see Hindus as a religion, but actually it's a spirituality. If you look at Hinduism, if you look at the deep truth of Hinduism, what props it from behind, it's universal spirituality that accepts everybody. Hence, India, land of refuge. So there's this great myth of intolerance about Hindus, and it's funny because it's been a one-way traffic. Hindus, on the one hand, have accepted that, you know, God may be Muhammad, he may be Christ, maybe Krishna, maybe Buddha, maybe Zarathustra. But they've been the most persecuted community in the world. So it's been a one-way traffic. And it always baffled me that the people who were the most persecuted in the world, who suffered the most, are today called intolerant. How did this myth come about? Well, I think the British are greatly responsible for it, because when the British came to India, there were only a few, and they needed, you know, to govern a huge country. And the main problem were the Hindus, because the Hindus were the community that had kept its customs, kept its, you know, spirituality, kept its cultural fabric. So the British set about diminishing the ego of the Hindus, the pride of the Hindus. And I must say they succeeded admirably, because they were ridiculed by the British press, as today they're ridiculed by the Indian press and the international press. Then the British did something very smart. They took the best, you know, the cream of the Hindus, and they got them educated in Oxford or in Cambridge in England. And these people came back totally westernized, and in turn their children and grandchildren. And today you can see that the generation after generation of those people who were educated in UK, no offense here, you know, are ruling India. They're the journalists, they're the, you know, intellectual, they're the high bureaucrats, not the politician. It's a different breed, you know. And they still make fun of Hindus, you know. And this is where majority come, because on this planet, out of 6 person, one is a Hindu. Every 6 person is a Hindu. So Hindu are 1 billion in the world, great majority. There are 1 billion Hindus in the world. There's still about 800 million left in India. And they're one of the most educated, most law-abiding, you know, they don't go about, you know, burning cars and rioting and killing people. Their children top most of the universities. You know, if you see in the US, they have this this spelling competition called Spell Bee. Most of the girls and boys who wins are Hindus, you know. Hindus do well wherever they are, even when they're exported as laborers to Mauritius, you know, they end up, you know, becoming respectable people, putting their children in universities. So Hindus is a, you know, educated, rich community now emerging. You know, some of the top, you know, some of the top CEOs in the world are Hindus. Politicians are coming a little bit. They're starting to come out in the US, and yet, being 1 billion, they believe they behave as a minority. This is also a great mystery, that these people who have power, who have money, who have brains, are not able to understand their weight, even in India. Today, I see, you know, this country has still, I'm a defender of Hindus, by the way. There are not many journalists who are defending, Western journalists who are defending Hindus, so I'm a lone specimen. But it baffles me to see that, you know, Hindus have a minority mindset. That today, in India, where they still are 75 to 80%, where they still control a lot of things, where they still are educated, they're not aware of their number. They're not aware of their power. So the mirage is there. The mirage is for Hindus. The Hindus have a mirage because they do not see their power, their number, their goodness, their tolerance. So in turn, when this label of intolerance is thrown, it was first thrown by the British, you know, to the Hindus, and then when Mr. Nehru came to power in 1947, for good and bad reasons, he chose to, you know, let go of the ancient traditions of India and borrow everything that the British had left, the constitution, the education system, that same education system which produced clones, which are today in power, the judicial system, everything he borrowed from the British without caring to adapt it to the Indian psyche, which is so unique and which in itself, you know, had so many answers to the world's problems. So many of the answers of the problem that India is facing are there in India. You know, whether it's a Panchayat system, whether it's Shefali was speaking today about, you know, the ancient traditions. But India is still looking at the West for answers to its problems. And this is a tragedy. So, the myth of intolerance. So Mr. Nehru was the first one after the British who started throwing mud at the Hindus, at the customs. Today we see that the institutions of India, like the Supreme Court, continue, you know, to belittle and to cut down on Hindus' practice and custom. Again, you know, 800 million people are there in this country. It's not a small weight, it's a big weight. You know, it's a powerful intellect, it's a power. But they stand down, they do not react. So the myth of intolerance continued to be, and especially when the Hindus come to power. Because when the Hindus were in power, if you see the great Hindu kingdoms, you know, whether it's a Vijayanagar kingdom, for instance, you know, the last great Hindu kingdom was that of Vijayanagar. Even today, I don't know how many of you have been to Hampi. It's such a mystical place, you know, you can still feel, you know, the greatness, the goodness, the aura of this place. Every statue had its nose and ears chopped, but still there's such beauty. How many of you have been to Hampi? It's an extraordinary place. So Hindu power was also in that place very tolerant. All religions were accepted. You know, it was the rule of the Dharma, of goodness, of justice, and there was prosperity, and there was, you know, so much support to arts. Vijayanagar went away to the last great empire. Then the Hindus came back to power in 1999 with Mr. Vajpayee. The campaign of intolerance that followed was unique to observe. You know, it was unique to observe when Mr. Vajpayee came back to power and you know, came back in 2000 again. How much slander was thrown on Hindus and Hindu power. You know, the entire media spoke about church being vandalized, though afterwards it was found that they had not been vandalized. You know, there were bomb attacks. There were accusations of intolerance towards minorities. Again, India is the only country in the world where minorities have found refuge and have been able to practice in total freedom their religion. Total freedom, including the first Arab Americans that came before the Muslim invasions, all the Christians that came here. If you look at the Inquisition in Goa that Sheikh Ali speaks about, the Portuguese who came, they were welcome. They were welcome to the trade. And what did they do in exchange? They started Inquisition, burning, torturing, crucifying. So it's been a one-way traffic, but still that label of intolerance is thrown at Hindus, especially when they come to power. So Mr. Vajpayee suffered from it. I don't think he ever recovered. I don't think he ever recovered from that campaign of slander. After that, they tried their best to please the media, to please the intelligentsia, but they could never succeed. Then we come to the Gujarat riots, which are taken as a symbol of intolerance, of Hindu intolerance. But if you look at them, the spark that triggered was the burning of 58 innocent Hindus in the Sabarmati train. And the media never mentioned that, that 58 people were totally innocent, we had done nothing wrong, we're not criminals, coming back from Ayodhya. And among them, 36 women and children were burned like animals by a crowd. This is something that is a blot on democracy, it's a blot on anybody who perpetuates such a crime. So this is what triggered the riots. But riots like that don't happen just because of one event. They happen because of sections of events over many years, many decades sometimes centuries of pent-up anger, frustration, and one spark, it exploded. Now, Mr. Modi has been accused many times, many times, of being the one responsible for these riots. But the people who descended in the streets were, from normal people, from the Dalit to the Brahmins, to the Kshatriyas, the Gujarati people who descended in the streets. If someone must be judged, they must be judged. But again, it was triggered by a crime which is unforgivable. So Mr. Modi came to power in 2014. Again, the same campaigns of intolerance was thrown at him from all quarters, with the collaboration not only of the Indian media, but of the Western media. I am ashamed to see, and I have the same experience as a journalist, that my editors-in-chief are only interested in India where something negative happens. I'm telling you, if you're a foreign journalist in India, and if you want to write and get published, you write negatively. It's no big secret. You write negatively, you write about caste, you write about rapes, you write about kidney traffic, you write about poverty, you write about City of Joy. You're sure to be published. Why? Because the West still has a superiority complex. Even those people who are experts on India, the Indologists, people like Audrey Touchke, people like Christophe Jaffrelot in France, so many of them, they have this unconscious, sometimes conscious, superiority complex that they know better, that the Judeo-Christian civilization, is what India needs. So if you have that superiority complex in you, you tend to look at a country, and that is India, in a very critical manner. And, the BBC particularly, the British who colonized India and bled India. If you look at the archives of the British, there were great famines, between 1800 and 1900, 20 million Indians died of famine. These are the British archives. 20 million Indians died of famine. And the British were supposed to have brought prosperity, democracy, education to India. 20 million people in India died of famine between 1800 and 1900. Very few people know this. So the BBC should, feel a little bit, careful. But my experience has been, and no, I'm not casting any aspersion on the BBC because it's a remarkable television. Their documentaries are some of the best in the world. So, but as far as the coverage of India goes, it has always been negative. I remember in Kashmir, when I was covering Kashmir in the late 80s, and from between 87 and 97, I spent a lot of time in Kashmir. In those days, it was under curfew most of the time, so there was one hotel open in Srinagar. It was on the band, forgot the name of the hotel, but all the Western journalists found themselves there. And I was the only one who knew that the Pakistani government was supporting, financing, and arming the Kashmiri militants. All the other journalists, including Mark Tully, said, no, it is not true. The Indian government is accusing wrongly the Pakistani government to support terrorism. But I knew it was true. It was not possible otherwise. So the BBC always does negative stories on India. Now, if you take the myth of rape, true, there are rapes in India. True, there are things in India which are terrible, rapes and injustice and poverty and caste problem. But they've been amplified so much in the Western media, that people in the West have this idea that India is a land of rape. And you look at the statistics, proportionally there are much less rapes in India than in Sweden. This myth of intolerance is also, the negative image that attaches itself to India. And rape at the moment, especially since the Delhi rape and after Katwa, has been something which dominates the Western press when they talk about India. And even if you read, Google India, in the 20 articles, there are at least 3 articles on rape. So even Indians themselves have an idea that India is a land of rape. My sister has traveled all over India. I have so many friends who have traveled all over India, especially in the south. India is a safer place than the suburbs of Washington. There are places in Washington when you go from the most posh place to... No, because I'm married to an Indian, so and I think Indian women are wonderful, extraordinary. I'm a defender of the Shakti. So this is part of the myth of intolerance. The Americans, the New York Times have done such negative articles on India, on Mr. Modi. It's got a personal vendetta against Mr. Modi and Hindus and the BJP. But do Americans, did they ever have an American president? No, Hillary Clinton lost. And you see Mrs. Gandhi in the 70s, she was like, it's the same as the president, prime minister of India. She governed India with an iron hand, for nearly 20 years. In the 70s, Americans still didn't have a women president. The French never had a woman president. So they keep throwing this mud at India, but they themselves, are far away. I remember going many times to Pakistan and meeting Benazir Bhutto. She was sitting at a desk, and all the men were standing head down, in a country which is Islamic and, where men hold such an important place in Pakistan, that the Shakti element has gone also to Pakistan. It's gone to Bangladesh, where the last 2 presidents have been women. The first woman prime minister in the world was in Sri Lanka, Mrs. Bandaranaike. So the myth of intolerance is also the myth of India always being portrayed negatively in the Western press. And now the Western journalists will tell you, it's true, but look at India. Your own journalists are portraying your own country negatively. So this is really a problem. Take caste, Caste is something that Westerners are obsessed by caste. My perception is that in India, since 1947, and there the Congress, should be praised, India has been trying to get over the caste system, out of the caste system, The youth has been trying to go beyond the caste system. My wife, she didn't know from which caste she was when I married her. She had no clue. Her parents never told her. There's an aspiration in India to go beyond caste. And yet in the West, if you see Western Indologists, the studies about caste are run by millions. Do a search on caste in Google and you'll get at least 2 million hits. Indian caste. Just type Indian caste on Google, you get at least 2 million hits. Many of them from Westerners, Western Indologists, Western specialists, Western writers. So again, this is an image, a cliche based on some reality that attaches to India. Same thing is true of poverty. Book like the City of Joy, maybe well-meaning books, I know Dominique Lapierre, he's a well-meaning man. Part of his money is put back in the Sundarban Island for some villages. But it gives to Westerners the impression that the entire India is a slum. But it is not true, It is not true because I shuttle between the south and the north, and I see that in Pondicherry, the level has gone up. People who had no cycle, then they got a cycle, then they got a moped, then a motorcycle. Now they have borrowed from the bank to get a car. So that myth of intolerance is also rooted in the way, people speak about poverty in India, that India is a poor country. But India is not a poor country. There is so much money in India. Indians are such good savers, from the simple people to the rich people. True, they save in the black often, unfortunately, but they're good savers. They buy land, they have gold. So there is a lot of money. It just needs to be brought to the surface. There's a lot of money that needs to be brought back to the surface. India, but India can be again a prosperous country. And India will be a prosperous country again if it surmounts all the problems that affect him. So the myth of intolerance was thrown at Mr. Modi, and it is still thrown at Mr. Modi. And for me, it's a paradox because there is no country in the world which is more tolerant than India. I will repeat it again. There is no country in the world that is more tolerant than India. And I, as a Westerner, as a Frenchman, when I started being a journalist, doing freelance, with my white face, my cameras, my ignorance, I was welcomed everywhere. I have never been, beaten up or aggressed, or my passport being asked on the street in Delhi or anywhere in India, who are you? Never. I have lived here for 45 years and never have been mugged. Never my passport has been asked. Try to be an Indian in Paris in the metro and, looking at the lost with some cameras, you'll see. So India is a land of tolerance, and yet this label of intolerance is thrown all the time at India, especially at Hindus, who are the most tolerant of all. True, I'm all for secularism, but I do believe that the spirituality, that standard that props up Hinduism, is the most secular in the world, because it is, once again, I repeat myself, it is the only spirituality that accepts the fact that God may manifest himself or herself at different times, using different names, using different scriptures. This is why I'm married to an Indian. She's half Hindu, half Sikh. But when I took her to Paris, and my father is a very staunch Catholic, and he wanted to take her to church, she had no problem. You see, because she's a Hindu, she had no problem going to church. She didn't feel that she was committing a sin, or she was betraying her religion by going to a church with my father. Now, ask a Christian in India to go to a temple. He's being told by the missionaries that, it's a sin, that even putting a putu on your head is a sin, that doing a puja, we have workers, in Pondicherry who are Christians, and when my wife does a puja in a workshop, they do not want to come. So it's a one-way traffic, I'm sorry, but it's a one-way traffic. So Hindus, the most tolerant people in the world, have been accused of being the most intolerant, and it's being used very effectively against them, very effectively. I can see today that, even the government of Mr. Modi, Mr. Modi has been, he's gone out of his way to, to make everybody feel safe, that, I'm the Prime Minister of all Indians, of the Christians, of the Muslims, I'll invite you, of the Dalits, again Dalits, this is such a great myth of the Dalits. It's such a great myth of the Dalits, that it is true, the problem are between Dalits and the caste which is just above them. This has been my experience. Not Dalits and Brahmins. It's not that Brahmins go and beat up Dalits. The problem is always between two castes which are, next to each other. And often the problem is between one caste which has been converted and the other caste which has not been converted. Because the caste that has been converted, gets more money, more scholarships, more education, more free medicines, and the other caste hasn't. So the myth of Dalits is also something that, is thrown at India all the time, both in India and by Western Europe, and which is at least 75% partially untrue. I know many Dalit leaders for whom being a Dalit is a business, and nobody dares to say anything today in politically correct India. If you're a Dalit leader, nobody will say anything against you. So it's again something that Hindus should defend, that some of your great saints have been Dalits, Today, Amrita Anandamayi come from the lowest caste. You can't find a lower caste than Amrita Nandamai, and I've seen Brahmins prostrating themselves at her feet, building hospitals for her, building a university in Coimbatore, one of the best universities in India. She comes from the lowest caste. And so many of you saints have been Dalits, but Hindus are not able to coherently defend themselves. Why is that? Why is it that because I'm a Westerner, people listen to me, but actually whatever I'm saying is there? Sri Aurobindo said it, Swami Vivekananda said it, Sri Sai Shankara is saying it today. So many of your saints have said it, I have not invented anything. That Dalits are also, like women, are also been revered. True, there are, problems and intolerance, but they've been amplified, But Dalits have been respected like women. Some of them have come up, Your president is a Dalit now. Before that, Mr. Narayan was a Dalit. So many chief ministers have been Dalits. And they take advantage of it. So it's also important when you're accused of being intolerant and you're not to intelligently and coherently defend yourself. And I see that the BJP is incapable of doing that. Now they're running, they're hiding now. Because they don't know how to say, look, look at the Christian Syrians, look at the Jews who were never persecuted here. I'll give you the statistics, Look at the statistics of women raped in Sweden, or in Norway, or in Washington. It's 10 times more than ours proportionately. They're not capable. It's another case of a majority that behaves like a minority. You get my point? Most tolerant country in the world is in India, and I'm including everybody, If you see Sufism, which unfortunately today, has become defunct, except dancing and some, you can't call Ajmer a Sufi place because the real Sufism was incarnated by people like Dara Shikoh, Aurangzeb's brother, who translated the Upanishad, who believed that, the Quran had the inspiration in the ancient Hindu scriptures, He was a true Sufi saint. What we see today is just a parody of Sufism. But Sufism, again, is born here in India. It's a product of, Bhakti and Islam. It's a blending of the two, wonderful blending. Christianity also. I know many, Christians, whose parents are tolerant, they remain Christian, but they adopted many of the customs of the Hindus, so they were in harmony with the Hindus. Even in Kashmir, it was true. It was true in the 60s and 50s. That Hindus used to go to Muslims' home and Muslims used to come to Hindus' home. This is gone. This is gone. I saw it going in Kashmir. I saw the first Hindu leaders, assassinated. I saw people, strangled with wire and women raped and people crucified, and all the Hindus fled. A few weeks, all of them gone. So the myth of intolerance is not only totally untrue, but you should counteract by saying, look, we are the most tolerant country in the world, and we still today are the most tolerant country in the world that accept everybody. Today in India, everybody can practice the religion. Everybody, the Muslim, the Christian, the Buddhist, everybody. But these myths go on, that Buddhism disappeared from India because the Brahmins attacked it. What rubbish, Buddhism disappeared because it was non-violent, so it opposed no resistance. Hindus are Kshatriyas, and the spirit of Bhagavad Gita is still there somewhere, So some Hindus defended themselves. There was Shivaji Maharaj, Maharana Pratap, Rani of Jhansi, so many. But Buddhism, because, it believed in absolute ahimsa, like the Dalai Lama believes today, they didn't defend themselves, and they were wiped out from India. Again, I'm saying it's no big deal, but not many Indians are able to say that when that accusation is thrown, that Buddhism disappeared of India because of the Brahmins. If you've done, how many of you have done Vipassana course? How many of you have done Vipassana course, yeah? So in Vipassana, Mr. Goenka was a very respectable and wonderful gentleman whom I interviewed, says it, I mean, indirectly, that Brahmins are responsible for the disappearance of Buddhism from India, but it's absolutely untrue. So the myth of intolerance, absolutely untrue, because India is the most tolerant country yesterday and today. yesterday and today. You know, a Hindu today is still capable of going to a mosque or going to a church, you know, going to Buddhist temple without feeling that he's committing a sin. You know. And also, this majority that is so tolerant, that accepted everybody, that still accept everybody, doesn't see itself as it is. Doesn't see, you know, that it's a billion people on this planet, you know, one of the most educated, tolerant, affluent, rich communities in the world, you know, and that whatever they want, you know, they did good, and they still do good. So it's important, you know, that you be able to defend. Look, there's one lady here who spoke so brilliantly this morning about, you know, spirituality and New Dharma. She's not even a Hindu. So why can't Hindus do that? Why do you keep letting your media attack you all the time? You know, I mean, I'm a militant Frenchman, so it revolts me. That's all every day, you know, if you read the Indian papers, you know, you get depressed. I ban newspaper from my house. I've stopped reading newspaper because you start your day, maybe true all over the world, I don't know, I live in India, but you start your day feeling depressed. You open, yesterday, we were going to meet a minister and the TV was on and there was a debate on the election in Karnataka. It was like a fish market, no? It was so shrill and so uncouth and so, you know, you don't feel like listening to it, you know? You need to uplift this country. You need to uplift Indians, Hindus, and tell them, look, you are tolerant, you know. Look at your history, look today, you know. But you need to defend yourself. Don't have to take weapons, you know, use your voice. Write emails, you know. When there is a story that is negative about India being intolerant, I see it in CNN, I see it in BBC, I see it in New York Times, you know, I see it in Bloomberg. So many stories are negative about India these days. It's like a concerted campaign, you know. Write an email, you know, look, I'm a Hindu, what you say is not true, I give you this instance, that instance. Look how many Jews were there, they were never persecuted. You know, it has its weight. But Hindus are too passive, you know, they just been beaten up so many times that they take the beating and they keep quiet. You know what I mean? It's important, you know, it's important that when people say that India is intolerant, those of you who have the voice and have the intelligence and, you know, rise against it. In India, you know, journalists are not very courageous people. They're courageous with their pens, but if a woman confronts a journalist, you know, who's written something very negative in the street, you know, he'll be careful next time. If he receives 4, 5, 6, 7 emails saying what you said is untrue, you know, next time he or she will be more careful. Journalists in India, you know, it's sad because Marxism, you know, was a great, you know, it was a great idea and a great ideal, but it died all over the world. It's dead all over the world, including in China. You know. But India, it's so much alive, you know. It's so much alive. I mean, Indians have that sincerity also, so they carry it to the extreme, you know. So entire generation of journalists, you know, are brought up in this Marxist view of India, that India is an, you know, bad country with bad people, you know, with injustice on women, on caste, on Dalits, you know, and they make a crusade of it, you know. They're not necessarily bad, you know, it's just that that's the way they're brought up. So we need to change that. We need to bring up journalists, you know, who look at India with Indian eyes, you know. If only Indians would look at India with Indian eyes, you know. I'm a Westerner who look at India with Indian eyes. But if only Indians would look at India with Indian eyes, you know, and think, you know, okay, Hindus are intolerant, okay, take 20 centuries of Hindu history, you know. If you take 20 centuries of Hindu history, you will see that it just wipes off this accusation of intolerance, you know, because it's the most tolerant country in the world. You know. So you need to look at your country with Indian eyes, you know, with spiritual eyes, you know, that there are answers to depression, you know. In the West, you know, out of 5 people, 3 are depressed, you know. In India, we know, you know, do some pranayama in the morning, do some meditation, do some hatha yoga. We know it exists, you know, it's an answer. But Hindus themselves are not using it. They're not giving these children these extraordinary tools to lead better lives and to avoid the depression that's bound to happen in your life. You tell me when my time is over, huh? How much time I have left? 5 minutes, yeah. You know, it's such a wonderful tool. You know, I keep being grateful to India because I discovered these tools when I came here. I came as a ignorant Frenchman, young but ignorant, and then I discovered that there is a knowledge in this country, that's so precious, that tells me, what's the purpose of the life, what I can do in a life, what are the tools to help me, be a better person with my fault, because everybody has faults, But these tools have helped me, meditation and pranayama and hatha yoga. So it's important that Hindus learn to speak in a coherent manner and defend themselves and stand up for their culture and for their goodness. You understand that? It's important that when this accusation of intolerance is thrown at Hindus, that they're not only able, but that they have the guts to answer, the guts and the drive to answer. Because I see that it is not so, and this is why these people were in a minority. The minority that is accusing the majority of being intolerant, they're small numbers. They're very small numbers. They're like, 150 or 200 people who rule what is said in this country, in the media. There may be 200 people, They're a small minority, but they're able to hold sway. They're able to persuade the world that India is an intolerant country. They're able to persuade the world that, Mr. Modi is a dangerous man. Probably the guy never even slapped someone in his life, It's like, when you see the RSS, when I also had this idea that RSS was a dangerous, outfit when I started journalist. And I went to meet the then chief of RSS in Delhi, in that near old Delhi. And he was an old fuddy duddy, he had his shorts, and he spoke so softly, and so I thought he was, a soft guy, And yet the image of the RSS being a dangerous outfit is it's still going on. It's still going on. Hindus need to defend their country when they're accused of intolerance because it's totally untrue. India is the most tolerant country in the world. Thank you.
Namaste. We hope you enjoyed this Chitti Media content. Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.